71% of people on the left would not consider being in a relationship with somebody who voted for Trump. Among people leaning right, 47% would not consider being in a relationship with somebody who voted for Clinton. Various surveys across time and different age groups have reported similar findings. For example, a survey among college students found that 71% of Democrats, people leaning left, would not consider going out on a date with a Republican. Among people on the right, 31% would not consider having a date with a Democrat. Interestingly, it's Democrats that are more closed-minded in these surveys, even though normally being a Democrat and being on the left is associated with more open-mindedness. And it's conservatives, people on the right, that are generally more conservative and less open-minded. This type of political polarization is currently at very high levels, but it's not unusual at all. Throughout history, people have selected their partners very strongly based on their political similarity. However, is this how it should be? If we look at psychological research, is political similarity actually that important to determine relationship satisfaction? The answer is a resounding no. Across multiple studies, political similarity has little to no effect on relationship satisfaction and objective relationship outcomes. Importantly, the effect of dissimilarity itself seems to be nearly zero. The effect is mostly mediated by the communication around the dissimilarity that occurs. So if you get into fights and arguments all the time about political differences that you have, that of course has negative effects on the relationship, but the differences themselves are not necessarily a problem. Therefore, we see that communication style mediates much of the effect on relationship outcomes. As one paper concluded, the quality of discussion and conflict, not merely their occurrence, help explain the political and relational results of political dissimilarity within romantic relationships. Another paper concluded, pro-social processes such as appreciation and perspective-taking may moderate these effects. Basically, if somebody says, I voted for Trump, and your immediate reaction is, oh, that's disgusting, I could never be with this person, that is a rather closed-minded take. Conversely, if your reaction is, that's very interesting, I seem to think that you are generally an interesting and intellectual person, and I'm personally highly appalled by Trump, so I'm wondering what made you vote for this person. Then maybe you can get into a dialogue and actually find out that you're not so different after all. Very often these days, differences in political views are caused by differences in the information we have. Because of social media, we're all in very strong echo chambers. A personal experience that I had when I created a new YouTube channel is that I clicked on one video about something related to Trump, which was apparently pro-Trump, which for the record I'm not, and the algorithm therefore concluded that I must be a Trump fan, and since then my feed has been filled with pro-Trump rhetoric and clips of Fox News. I had to very actively educate the algorithm that I'm interested in unbiased, independent, objective information, not rhetoric in favor of any particular candidate. Moreover, it's good to understand that almost all opinions are always subjective and exist on a continuum. You may think it's cruel what currently happens at the border in the US, but on the other hand, you may also acknowledge that there was a problem with immigrants causing crime. How you balance and weigh these factors is what determines your ultimate viewpoint. Even though in the end you may have similar beliefs, you may come to a different decision simply based on a different weighing of the information that you had available. More importantly, even if you actually disagree, you have to wonder, is this really what matters the most in a relationship? If you look at psychological science, here are the things that really matter big picture: attachment style, communication quality, core personality traits, and shared life goals. If you find a partner with a secure attachment style that is a good communicator, a good person, and you have shared life goals, you think you can build a life together and a future, but you disagree about how the healthcare system should work, maybe that shouldn't be the priority with which you decide if this is the person you could spend your life with. The second major reason that in research we see very weak effects of political similarity to predict relationship satisfaction is that views can change. In fact, views very often do. Unlike things like core personality traits, which are relatively fixed over time and genetically determined. Our views change all the time. In fact, Winston Churchill supposedly famously said, if you're not a liberal at 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 40, you have no brain. Regardless of the political sentiment expressed in that quote, everyone should acknowledge that views can change. In fact, in research we see very clearly that partners, when they come together, they become a lot more similar over time. When you have more dialogue with anyone, usually your viewpoints will gravitate a little bit towards each other. Most people in general become more similar to the people that they hang out with. So just because you disagree now doesn't mean you're going to disagree and fight about it for the rest of your life. If we zoom out and get the bird's eye view of the criteria that really determine a successful romantic relationship versus the criteria that people use to select their partners, we see massive discrepancies. Political similarity is one of those things that, yes, it's nice if your partner has similar political views, but it's much more important how you communicate about these things. And overall, political similarity is a very, very small predictor of relationship satisfaction and objective relationship outcomes. The finding that people generally use very different criteria to select a partner from the criteria that make them happy is not unexpected if we consider that we as humans have evolved for a completely different world than the one we currently live in. If you're interested in an evidence-based, unbiased review of what determines relationship outcomes, check out my personal development course. The link is in the description. And if you like this type of evidence-based content, I'd be honored if you like and subscribe.